Let's talk about 5 period problems you definitely don't want to ignore. Look, these things may be common, especially with PCOS, but you want to address them, you want to understand why they're happening, and most importantly, what you can do about it. This is what we're talking about today. Let's get to it. Okay, so I've said it before and I'll say it again. Period problems are super common, but that doesn't mean that they're normal and that you should have to live with them. There are specific period problems that are more common with PCOS, and we're going to talk about why they happen, what are the hormones that are involved under the surface. This is going to help you understand how to start addressing them head on from the source so that you don't have to worry about your periods anymore. Red flag number 1 is missing periods. If you go more than 35 days between periods, or maybe you get your period every 40, 60, or 90 days, it's pretty random, or you get less than 10 periods per year, you likely have missing periods. This is actually one of the diagnostic criteria for PCOS, so it's super common. Missing periods are usually due to lack of ovulation. So if your period comes every 90 days, there has likely not been ovulation, which is called an anovulatory cycle. Again, this is common with PCOS. It's usually the result of high insulin and high androgen levels that are preventing your ovaries from ovulating. So when you have high insulin levels, the ovaries are very sensitive to those higher levels of insulin, and they start releasing testosterone instead of estrogen, and that prevents ovulation. Now, if you've gone 3, 4, or more months without a period, your doctor may recommend taking birth control to induce a bleed. So they may prescribe something, birth control or just progesterone, in order to help your body shed the uterine lining. And even though birth control is definitely not your only option, you can regulate your cycle and get a healthy period more naturally. It is a good idea to do this and to take the birth control and to shed the uterine lining, because excessive buildup of the uterine lining can increase your risk for uterine cancer. So this is an important thing to know. And certainly if you've gone several months or more without a period, you'll want to contact your doctor and make sure that they're aware and are offering you some options. But again, birth control is not your only option. If you work on reversing insulin resistance, reducing androgen levels, reducing inflammation, you can 100% regulate your cycle on your own in more natural ways. Red flag number 2 is heavy periods. Heavy periods affect about 20 to 25% of women, and with PCOS, they are very common. Now, a heavy period means that you're losing more than 80 milliliters of blood throughout all the days of your period, which is equivalent to about 16 regular tampons that are soaked. And so if you have a period for 4 days and you have to change your tampon or pad more than 4 times a day, that likely means that you have heavy flow, a heavy period. The other criteria for heavy periods is that if you're bleeding for more than 7 days, and oftentimes heavy periods are more painful and contain more clots, and these things generally go hand in hand. If you have a heavy flow, it lasts for more than 7 days, or you have to change your pads or tampons very frequently, more than 4 to 5 times a day, that likely means that you're in this group. Now, there are 2 common reasons why your period may be heavy, and again, this is a big red flag that you're going to want to pay attention to and definitely address. Reason number 1 is too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. Progesterone is a hormone that lightens your period, and so if you have a buildup of estrogen and you're not ovulating, it means that you're not producing a good amount of progesterone to counteract the effects of estrogen. And so that can lead to heavy periods. And similarly, the second reason is an underactive thyroid. So if you have hypothyroidism and your thyroid is not making enough thyroid hormone, your ovaries are going to have a hard time ovulating. And again, that means there's not going to be enough progesterone in your body to lighten your periods. Plus, hypothyroidism can also reduce your body's ability to detoxify or get rid of excess estrogen. And so you can see that the equation that we have here when it comes to heavy periods is too much estrogen, not enough progesterone. There are a few other reasons that could be causing this imbalance, but this is at the source of most heavy period situations. And so this is something that I wanted you to know about. Now, it's important to know that there are other far more serious causes of heavy periods like polyps, infections, and fibroids. And so you want to make sure that your doctor is aware of what's going on and that they're running the right tests to help you understand what is the source of this very big period red flag. Red flag number 3 is prolonged bleeding, prolonged periods. So we just talked about the fact that if you're bleeding for more than 7 days, it likely counts as a heavy flow, a heavy period. But it's also important to know if you're bleeding for much longer than 7 days, maybe 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, meaning the whole month, this is something to note. And so my clients often describe this as having a reverse period because they say instead of bleeding for a week and then not bleeding for 3 weeks, I bleed for 3 weeks out of the month and then have no bleeding just for maybe 5 to 7 days. This obviously has a huge impact on your quality of life, on your energy levels, on your stress levels, and it can even negatively impact relationships, like intimate relationships. I have many clients who come in and say, this is really coming between me and my husband because I'm constantly bleeding and it's making our life a lot more stressful and difficult. In order to understand why this is happening, it's important to know what are the roles of estrogen and progesterone, these two very important sex hormones. So broadly speaking, this is an overgeneralization, but I think it's going to help you understand what's happening here. Estrogen is the hormone that builds up the uterine lining. It deposits the blood cells into the uterine lining and it kind of cushions it. And then progesterone comes in after ovulation and it holds the uterine lining in place to make sure that if an egg is fertilized, then it can get implanted and the pregnancy can progress as it should. And so when you are not ovulating, as is the case with many women with PCOS, you're going to have a buildup of the estrogen, a buildup of the uterine lining, but not enough progesterone to hold it in place because there is no ovulation. And so what's going to happen is that the lining is constantly going to shed, and sometimes it has built up so much that the bleeding lasts for weeks on end. So again, if you're in this situation where you have a heavy flow, prolonged bleeding, and you seem to have this situation of a reverse period where you're bleeding more days out of the month than not, you definitely want to consult someone. This is what I teach you to treat and manage inside the period return plan. So you should definitely see your doctor and get it evaluated. But let me tell you that this is something that you can reverse on your own, and we can get you to ovulate, make enough progesterone, and balance out your estrogen levels so that you're not dealing with this situation of a flipped period. Red flag number 4 is severe PMS symptoms. So even though this is something that happens 7 to 10 days before you would get your period, it's still very much related to your menstrual cycle as a whole and can indicate that some hormones are imbalanced. Some PMS symptoms are normal, but if you're finding yourself completely out of commission, again, if it's something that is debilitating and you absolutely cannot go about your normal routines as you would elsewhere or otherwise throughout the month, this is a big red flag. So we're talking about pain, cramps, digestive issues, migraines, breast tenderness, as well as mood swings and even depression. Now, you may have had these PMS symptoms all throughout your life for years and years, and that may be all that you know, but that doesn't mean that it's gotta be this way. You can have a much healthier menstrual cycle once you balance the hormones and really work on a healthy period that shows up completely unannounced. So you can get your period without any prior signs, and that is of course ideal. That means that your PMS symptoms have been fully resolved and reversed, and this is exactly what I teach you to do inside the period return plan. Red flag number 5 is spotting between periods. Spotting is often light, sporadic bleeding that can happen between periods, or it can happen longer. It can happen for weeks and months on end. I've had clients inside the period return plan who've been spotting for many months prior to joining the program, and one of the things that causes spotting is not enough progesterone. So as I mentioned before, when you have estrogen levels that are building up throughout your cycle and they are causing the uterine lining to thicken, what we want is progesterone to come in after ovulation and hold this lining in place. But when you don't ovulate, as is the case with many women with PCOS, eventually your estrogen levels will start dropping and that lining will shed. And so this is oftentimes when we see spotting, when the lining sheds over a period of time, and it can cause this sporadic bleeding that's not necessarily in a certain pattern or predictable. The other reason that this could be happening is that there could have been ovulation, but not enough progesterone was made after ovulation. And so in this case, we would see spotting, or we would see a very short luteal phase, which means that usually your cycle comes prior to the 21 day that we want to see it. So remember, we said that a healthy cycle is anywhere between 21 to 35 days. I have a whole video about what makes a healthy period and a healthy cycle, so definitely go check it out. But over in that video, I said that 21 to 35 days is what we want to aim for. If your period comes sooner than that, maybe you get a period every 2 weeks or every 18 days, this likely means that you're not making enough progesterone after ovulation, and that's where you can see some spotting or a full-on period that comes a little bit too early. So whether it's no progesterone or very low levels of progesterone, both of which can cause this breakthrough bleeding or a short cycle, what we want to do is work on ovulation and boosting those progesterone levels. And it can take up to 100 days to fully regulate your cycle and bring about ovulation and make sure that your hormone levels are strong and that you're detoxifying and getting estrogen to the right levels so it doesn't build up too much. And then at the same time, you're helping progesterone be stronger and get released at higher levels so that your cycle can be at the right length without breakthrough bleeding and without any of the issues and red flags that we discussed today. Now, over the course of those 100 days, what I would recommend that you focus on are 3 important things. The first one is blood sugar control. The second one is reducing inflammation. And the third one is making sure your body can detoxify estrogen efficiently. I teach you how to do all 3 of these things step by step with the right tools, resources, and support inside the period return plan. Of course, you get recipes, meal plans, and my guidance as you walk through the process of regulating your cycle in 90 days or less. So patience is key. You need to give it a good 3 months. But if you're someone who needs help, who are not sure how to do this on your own, I highly recommend you join the waitlist. You can go to daphnachazen.com/waitlist. You're going to get notified when doors to the period return plan are open, and then you can decide if it's the right fit for you at this time. So go to daphnachazen.com/waitlist. You can read up about the program and get on the waitlist there. Okay, so let's recap the 5 red flags that we covered today. The first one is missing periods. The second one is heavy periods. The third one was prolonged bleeding. The fourth was severe PMS symptoms. And then the last one was mid-cycle spotting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's video. If you're struggling with any of these issues, or if you have questions, make sure to reach out to me either here in the comments below or over on Instagram. I'm at pcos.nutritionist.daphna. Cannot wait to see you again soon. I'll talk to you then.